Celebrities! Ever since the dawn of gaming, publishers have leached off their popularity to make a few extra sales. From the jolly Brian Dennehy looking jowls of John Madden, to whoever the hell this guy is. The famous have always had their mugs slapped on our softwares. However, every now and then, these idols want more than a simple paycheck and start demanding changes to fit their chosen first world ideologies, often to the detriment of the game itself, rendering it completely crap. So, this episode, we take a look at these subverting superstars, these botching bigwigs, and these pillaging personalities. As I say, but hello you. I'm Guru Larry, and I welcome you to Fact Hunt. 6 celebrities who ruined their own games. But before the fun begins, don't forget to click that subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, to be first to see future Fact Hunt episodes. And away we go! Yeah! Apocalypse and Destiny, you may ask? Why do we have one entry for these seemingly unconnected and completely different games that are separated by nearly 2 decades of advances in the glorious gaming industry? It's because they're both examples of the most common form of celebrity defecation all over again. Lousy voice acting. A studio will spend millions of dollars hiring a big star who then reads their lines as if a gun's being held to their head. Everyone will wish they'd just gone and done the normal thing and hired Nolan North instead. These 2 games are, by far, the most memorable examples. What's the first thing you think of when someone mentions the aggressively mediocre PS1 shooter Apocalypse? Bruce Willis, of course. He wasn't just voicing the main character. The character was his likeness too. Well, as much as his likeness can be on the PS1. He was the star of the game. And the cover art sure as hell wasn't going to let you forget that. Initially, Bruce Willis was only set to voice Trey Kincaid, the main character's AI-controlled sidekick. But then, some bright spark at Neversoft had the idea to ditch the sidekick and make Trey Kincaid the main character instead. Ironically enough, this actually ended up reducing Bruce's contribution to the game. He'd have a load more lines if he'd been your buddy. Though if the flat and listless performance of his one-liners in the game is anything to go by, that might not have been a good thing. Apocalypse itself isn't a terrible game or anything, but the worst, and definitely the funniest part of it, is Bruce Willis's corny one-liners. You've heard them all after about 5 minutes of playing the thing. In fairness to Neversoft, they inherited Apocalypse from another developer. Activision gave them 6 months to finish what was, apparently, a complete mess of a project. And all they had to work with, Bruce Willis-wise, was lines he recorded from back when he was just going to be his sidekick. A lot of his work had to be cut as a result, along with the whole buddy cop flick-aping sidekick concept. Neversoft didn't have time to screw around with that. In all honesty, his work doesn't even stand out too much compared to all the other bad acting in the PS1 days. Which can't be said for Peter Dinklage. Now, almost everyone loves Peter Dinklage. He's a bloody great actor who starred in some amazing shows. The only reason I say almost is because there's probably some people at Bundy who would like to do him an extreme and not exactly politically correct physical discourtesy. Dinklage was hired to play the role of Ghost in Destiny, a robotic AI companion which, appropriately enough, earned a robotic performance from Dinklage. Clearly, he studied all the greats in preparation for this performance. Mega Man 8, Resident Evil, Night Trap, the whole lot. However, Dinklage's performance was so bad, it almost threatened to derail Destiny as a whole, thanks to an endless procession of YouTubers eager to take the piss out of it and make meme compilation videos of his worst line readings. Bungie brought Tyrion back in to do more work, once more with feeling, as they say. But it wasn't much better, and eventually, using the excuse of Destiny being a constantly moving online game, they ditched Dinklage totally. Which doesn't happen often when it comes to big stars, it has to be said. They said that his schedule was just too packed for him to continue working on the game, though everyone could read between the lines. And who did they hire to replace Peter Dinklage and redo all of his lines? Nolan North. Yep, no doubt somebody wondered aloud why they just didn't hire him from the start. Even if you're a Yank who might not totally know the young ones, you'll probably recognise the show's humour from all of us British YouTubers who've ripped it off endlessly for our scripts. This classic anarchic early 80s comedy gave us so much. People's poets, homicidal gutter punks, far out hippies, cool persons, virtually every star of the next 10 years of British TV comedy, and even a hit single featuring the not at all sinister self-proclaimed Pied Piper of pop, Cliff Richard. Now, you'll be shocked to learn that this single was bad. But it was like the bloody Beatles compared to the young ones' game, which came out on the Spectrum in 1986 on a wave of hype, and turned out to be an absolute cackload of smeggy pants. Rather than be made by any of the usual suspects for bad tie-ins on the Spectrum, like Ocean or US Gold, the young ones' license was landed by a pretty obscure studio named Orpheus. Their director, a man named Paul Kaufman, had previously helped to make the Auric, one of the many also-ran British micros from the time, and he'd come up with a brilliant idea for a young ones game. Or so he thought. You pick one of the 4 students, and you have to search through their disgusting accommodations to find the items that particular person owns before leaving the house. Pure classic gaming. The big selling point is that unlike a lot of more faceless tie-in games, all the humour from the young ones show would be intact. Orpheus talked big about working with the show's creators, Rick Mayall, Ben Elton and Lise, to make sure that the characters were totally authentic. And this is where Orpheus ran into problems. Unlike most tie-in games where the people involved didn't really care much or understand what these young spotty coders were doing with their IP, everything that Orpheus wanted to do with the game first required the approval of the show's creators and the BBC. They actually had the temerity to request this, just to see if the game was faithful to the show. That, and they were also quite busy, meaning it would take Orpheus ages to actually get these people together to sign off on their pissy little Spectrum game, which naturally wasn't much of a priority for Ben Elton and company. As a result of this genius concept, the young ones took multiple months to actually make, to the point where it missed the utterly crucial 1985 Christmas period, pissing off big retailers like Boots, who put about 10,000 orders in for the game. And then, to add insult to injury, the game itself turned out to be a confusing, nearly unplayable load of bollocks. It's impossible to figure out what to even do in this turd. Spectrum magazine, Your Sinclair, had gone all in on promoting this game, even putting it on their front cover. They gave it perhaps the most carefully worded and optimistic 7 out of 10 in games writing history. Everyone else gave it 1, and I don't mean sexually. The complete failure of the young ones game, along with the continued failure of the Auric to make waves on the computer market, ended up spelling the end for Orpheus as a whole. And so, more than just ruining a game, these 3 creators of the young ones helped to ruin an entire company. And all because they wanted to make sure their IP was treated properly. The selfish fascist bastards! We all know this game, don't we? In case you've been living under a rock for the past 20 years, this is Lemmings by DMA Design. A glorious game of mammalian suicide prevention, where you assign various jobs to these critters and prevent them from accidentally offing themselves. It's one of Britain's finest exports. It's sold millions, and everyone loves it. There's also Lemmings 2, which is more of the same, and is also good. Lots of people know this too. However, far less people know Lemmings 3, aka the all-new world of Lemmings. Why is that? Well, partly because it's not very good. But the reason for that involves some rather unexpected meddling, even though this isn't a tie-in game. So let's see what's happened. It's no secret that by the time the third Lemmings game came around, DMA were getting slightly tired of the miniature critters. However, an offer had come in from no less a group than the Children's Television Workshop, aka the company behind Sesame Street. They had seen the potential in these lemmings, and they wanted to make them big cross-media stars of children's television with their own show. As a part of this, they wanted DMA to make a few changes to the game. Rather than have the lemmings be an identical troop of overly dependent creatures, they wanted a smaller group of lemmings that had their own personalities. If all had gone well, the all-new world of Lemmings would have been the first of several games that covered the adventures of these green-haired band of brothers through various worlds, tricks and traps. However, it did not go well. The gameplay changes were not exactly welcomed, and the changes to the classic Lemmings look went down like a lead balloon. Nothing about this game felt anything like Lemmings, even down to the things that should have been obvious. Like the lemmings now being considerably bigger and thus not even feeling like lemmings anymore. But it was clear that DMA's heart just wasn't in it at all. Mike Daly, one of the game's creators, has admitted that the game was indeed a bit crap and was mostly done out of contractual obligation, being the last game in a 6-game contract that DMA had signed with Psygnosis all the way back in 1987. As much as that had proved fruitful, the Scots were ready for a change. And when Lemmings 3 shipped, the overriding feeling at DMA was of relief more than anything else. But wait, what about the TV show? The guys behind Sesame Street? The fame and the millions of pounds it would no doubt have brought in? Well, none of that happened. After this game flopped, the Children's Television Workshop immediately pulled out of all negotiations. Their interference having quite appropriately taken the series straight off a cliff. Sony and Psygnosis would still keep Lemmings going through yet more ports and newer versions like a 3D game and so forth, but it was never quite the same. And aside from some obscure top-down open-world driving title, no one ever heard anything from DMA Design ever again. There's no denying that Last Action Hero is weird. It starts with Arnie Swiss cheesing those who wronged him in medieval Denmark, and it only gets stranger from there. There's people who like it and say it was actually an intelligent parody of the big manly action movies of the time, and there are others who think it's a load of complete and total gubbins. So it's no surprise that the tie-in game, or games, for Last Action Hero would be weird too. There's several different games with the name, and shockingly, they're all cack. One of the reasons for this, naturally, involves a certain Austrian oak sticking his big neck in where it wasn't wanted. Sony ImageSoft, the ones tasked with taking this weird film about making weird films and sticking it into a game that's about a film about making films, actually had a pretty good plan on paper for Last Action Hero. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but it does feature Arnold Schwarzenegger going about shooting lots of things with pistols, rocket launchers, miniguns, and, of course, the almighty Uzi 9mm. I mean, it is an Arnie film, and it's literally got action in the title. So, what more do you want? It's a complete no-brainer. But then, a fly appeared in the ointment in the form of a letter, or indeed a fax, from a lawyer, saying that Arnold Schwarzenegger did not want to be associated with violence, and did not want to be seen wielding guns in the game. Yes, that's THE Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, as we all know, has never shot anyone in any film, and certainly didn't in Last Action Hero. Funnily enough though, when the erstwhile Gary Whitta quizzed developers of the game back in the day for CVG, they said that not having any guns in the game didn't present us with any major problems. This, of course, was a total fib. Many years later, developer Pete Barron said that the omission of guns was a complete disaster that drove a massive Humvee through their entire design document. They couldn't even use Wile E. Coyote cartoon-style dynamite. In fact, it took ages for Arnie's lawyers to get back to them when they asked if Arnie could even throw as much as a punch at people in the game. It certainly would have been more interesting to see an action game with no punching or kicking, or literally anything at all. including the child character of the movie. Danny Madigan was also a no-no, according to Columbia's lawyers. Though no one really complained about that one, mind you. So, add all of this palaver to the usual time constraints of creating a tie-in game for a movie, and you eventually have a total disaster. In most versions, a rather padded-looking Arnold can do little but punch and kick enemies in the most basic of action sequences that tie together various bits from the film. Whether they include a level from Denmark or not, or if they include some low-quality FMV taken directly from the movie or not, they're all bloody rubbish. And Arnie's interference was a big part of that. Amusingly, it's not like there's no violence at all. The DOS version of the game features open-world driving, and even allows you to splatter pedestrians in a sort of proto-Grand Theft Auto style-y. The bee that Arnie had in his bonnet about guns and video games didn't last. His next tie-in game, True Lies, stuck a pistol in his hand and allowed you to gun down terrorists with reckless abandon. And surprise, surprise, the resulting game was 1,000 times better. Though I credit that to having a digitised Tom Arnold in the game. This entry may not be the best known game out there, but it's certainly one that's infamous in circles as the very last word in awful games. And while we had games that celebrities ruined through bog standard interference, this is perhaps the only case where a celebrity set out to purposely ruin a game he helped design, and he made it as crap as he possibly could. Why? Well, because he thought video games were a waste of time, so he set out to make a game that excelled at wasting everyone's time. It's time to look at Takeshi's challenge for the Famicom. The game's designer, Takeshi Kitano, was, and is, a famous celebrity in Japan. Mostly he prats around on television in variety shows, acting like a Japanese Noel Edmonds, while also directing highly acclaimed dramas about crime, the Yakuza, and other subjects. But for you Westerners out there, he's probably best known as the villain in cult game show Takeshi's Castle. Yes, he's that Takeshi. And the teacher from Battle Royale. You know, when Battle Royale wasn't a reference to Fortnite. He's really that intriguing. But in 1986, Taito decided to get in touch with Takeshi about making a game, even though he had no time for such pursuits, or indeed electronics of any kind. In Takeshi Kitano's eyes, things were much better when everyone entertained themselves by sitting around chain-smoking and playing mahjong, instead of using these electronic Nintendo contraptions. However, Takeshi decided to run with it. According to legend, Takeshi Kitano co-designed the game in a bar over many drinks, with a couple of eager programmers writing down and recording everything he came up with. Amazingly, the majority of these drunken ramblings actually ended up in the game, and the result is about as weird as it can get. This salaryman's adventures features such perfectly normal acts as getting drunk and divorcing your wife, punching your boss into his desk, losing your money at pachinko, yelling and being told to shut up, and an infamously hard hang glider section where you can only go up by hitting gusts of wind. There is a cheat code that allows you to skip straight to the end of the game, but it involves hitting the punch button 20,000 times on the title screen. And no, none of this is made up. If there's one segment of play that sums up the weirdness of Takeshi's challenge, it's the karaoke. You sing the same song 3 times into the Famicom's second controller mic, get told to shut up, and punch everyone else before an old man comes in and gives you a map to the endgame treasure. You reveal this map by not touching any button on your controller for an hour in real time. Once you've done this, however, don't be so eager to leave. You also have to punch the old man who gave you the map to death, otherwise he'll use it to get to the treasure before you. It's probably not an exaggeration to say that Takeshi's challenge is the weirdest game ever made, and it was done entirely on purpose. It's Takeshi Kitano's big joke at the expense of gamers everywhere. Despite all of this, the game was still a huge hit on release. And even if it hadn't sold well, Taito would have probably still made tons of money back on the game through their helplines, which were inundated with desperate gamers looking for any kind of answer to these ridiculous and insane puzzles. Even the game's strategy guide was completely wrong. Probably because the person who wrote it couldn't figure the game out either. Takeshi's challenge has, despite its purposeful, absolute cackness, earned a pretty unique place in the history of games, for there is nothing like it, and this video would be rather incomplete without it. Few celebrities had such a large input on a game, and then used it to take the piss and make such a ridiculous, twisted, mean-spirited and surreal parody on the games they scoffed at. As Takeshi says in the naturally crap single-screen ending you get if you somehow manage to complete the game, don't take everything so seriously. What a dick. Hello you. Thanks ever so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to be first to see future Fact Hunt episodes. Click on the bell if you already are to make sure you're notified, and be sure to check out my other episodes. And if you want to be super awesome, check out my Patreon. But thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time. Ta-ra for now.